The latest leaked information surrounding the young and the restless paints a chilling picture of how close Genoa City came to crossing a line that would have altered the Newman legacy forever. A moment where violence, desperation, and power converged inside Victor Newman's own home. According to these reports, the last confirmed sighting of Matt Clark placed him inside a small room adjacent to the private gym at Victor Newman's residence, a confined, almost symbolic space where physical strength, control, and survival collide. The choice of location alone speaks volumes. This was not a public confrontation, not a boardroom standoff, but an intensely private reckoning within the walls of Newman territory, where Victor's authority is absolute and the rules of the outside world often bend to his will. When Victor, already strained and under immense pressure, ordered Matt to stand up, viewers immediately sensed that this was not going to end with words. The tension in that moment was primal, stripped of pretense, as if two men were preparing for a bare-knuckle fight that would settle something far older and darker than their current dispute. For a time, the narrative seemed poised to descend into physical brutality. Matt Clark, long established as a dangerous and unpredictable figure, is not the kind of man who goes down easily. The idea of Victor Newman, weak and yet defiant, facing him hand-to-hand carried the implication of serious consequences for both men. However, subsequent dialogue updates revealed a decisive intervention that shifted the trajectory of the storyline entirely. Victor, rather than indulging in violence or allowing his son's rage to dictate the outcome, ultimately turned Matt over to the authorities. This revelation arrived almost quietly, yet its impact was seismic. After that moment, Matt vanished from the narrative, with no further sightings, no updates, no ominous hints of retaliation. His sudden absence created a vacuum filled with speculation, relief, and unresolved tension, forcing viewers to reconsider what might have happened had Victor chosen a different path. Nick Newman's reaction to these events adds a crucial psychological layer to the story. Nick openly questioned the logic of allowing Matt Clark to live, a sentiment born not from cruelty, but from fear and frustration. In Nick's mind, Matt represented an ongoing threat, a loose end that could unravel everything they were trying to protect. The idea that sparing him might invite future danger gnawed at Nick, fueling a darker impulse to end the problem permanently. This is where the storyline becomes especially haunting, because it suggests that Nick was genuinely prepared to cross a moral boundary that would have irrevocably changed him. Had Victor followed Nick's initial instincts, the consequences would not have been contained to Matt alone, they would have consumed Nick's life entirely. Victor's refusal to execute his son's flawed plan is one of the most significant decisions he has made in recent memory. In stepping in, Victor did not merely save Matt from death, he saved Nick from himself. The gravity of that cannot be overstated. If Nick had gone through with killing Matt, the aftermath would have been catastrophic. Even if the act had been framed as self-defense, the circumstances surrounding it would have invited scrutiny, legal consequences, and a lifetime of psychological torment. Nick would have carried the weight of that choice forever, haunted by the knowledge that he had taken a life deliberately. Victor understood this, perhaps instinctively, perhaps from hard-earned experience, and chose containment over annihilation. In doing so, he reaffirmed his role not just as a ruthless protector of the Newman Empire, but as a father who knows when power must be restrained. Nick should, in hindsight, feel immense relief that Victor intervened when he did. The leaks suggest that Nick was perilously close to committing an act that would have led to his arrest and prosecution. The small cottage where the confrontation unfolded became a crucible of persuasion, with everyone present that day urging Nick to stand down, to let reason prevail over rage. Their collective influence mattered. It created just enough distance between Nick and his darkest impulse to allow Victor to act decisively. Without that intervention, the Newman family might now be dealing not only with Matt Clark's death, but with Nick Newman behind bars, his life and legacy irreparably damaged. Adding another layer of complexity to this already volatile situation is Sienna, whose role may appear understated on the surface but proves to be critically important upon closer examination. Sienna's decision to leave the cottage and move to the main house was not a random choice. It placed her directly in Victor Newman's sphere of influence at a moment when timing was everything. By doing so, she became an unexpected but essential link in the chain of events that prevented the situation from spiraling out of control. Victor took note of her stance, her composure, and her willingness to distance herself from escalating chaos rather than feed into it. That assessment prompted him to intervene immediately, suggesting that Sienna's actions helped clarify the stakes and urgency of the moment for Victor. It is chilling to consider how differently events might have unfolded had she stayed, or had Victor not acted when he did. The absence of that intervention could have pushed Nick past the point of no return. The physical danger inherent in the confrontation cannot be ignored either. Matt Clark is a survivor, a man accustomed to escaping tight corners through violence and cunning. Had Nick attempted to finish the fight himself, the outcome could have been disastrous. Matt's ability to fight back might have resulted in Nick sustaining far more severe injuries than a simple fracture. The leaks suggest a very real possibility that Nick could have been gravely wounded or even killed in the process. In that scenario, Victor would not only have lost control of the situation, but potentially his son. The notion that Nick's life itself was at risk underscores just how reckless and emotionally driven his intentions had become. Victor's decision to hand Matt over to law enforcement was not just morally sound, it was strategically necessary to prevent irreversible loss. Taken together, these revelations recast the entire arc as a narrow escape from catastrophe. What could have become a story of murder, imprisonment, and death instead became a study in restraint, intervention, and the complicated ethics of power. Victor Newman once again proved why he remains such a formidable figure in Genoa City, not because he is willing to destroy his enemies at any cost, but because he understands when destruction would claim his own family as collateral damage. Matt Clark's disappearance into the custody of the authorities may feel anticlimactic to some viewers, but it represents a far more profound victory than any physical triumph. It is the victory of preventing a son from becoming something he could never undo, of stopping a cycle of violence before it consumed everyone involved. As the dust settles, the unanswered questions linger. What will become of Matt Clark now that he is out of sight? Will his absence truly mark the end of his threat, or merely a pause before another reckoning? How will Nick process the fact that he came so close to committing an act that would have destroyed his future? And how will Sienna's quiet but pivotal role in this crisis shape her standing within the Newman family moving forward? These uncertainties ensure that the fallout from that day will continue to ripple through Genoa City, reminding viewers that sometimes the most dramatic moments in The Young and the Restless are the ones where violence is narrowly avoided, and the true battle is fought within the soul rather than with fists. The possibility that The Young and the Restless is steering Noah Newman toward a life-changing departure from Genoa City carries far more emotional and narrative weight than a simple relocation storyline. Because at its core, this arc is not really about geography at all, but about survival, trauma, loyalty, and the moment when first love collides with permanent consequence. Noah Newman is in love in a way that feels raw, consuming, and sincere, the kind of love that convinces a young man that distance, sacrifice, and uncertainty are not obstacles but proof of commitment. Sienna Bacall has claimed his heart completely, and in his mind, following her to Los Angeles, California is not abandonment of his family or roots, but an extension of devotion. A declaration that the future he wants includes her at its center no matter where it unfolds. Noah's willingness to leave Genoa City is therefore deeply emotional rather than impulsive, grounded in the belief that love should be chosen boldly rather than negotiated cautiously. Yet what makes this storyline resonate is the fact that Sienna herself is not as certain, and her hesitation introduces a tragic irony. Noah is ready to give up everything to follow her, while Sienna is beginning to realize that keeping him close might cost him far more than he understands. Sienna's internal conflict becomes especially compelling because it is not driven by selfishness or fear of commitment, but by a growing sense of responsibility for the danger Noah has already faced because of her past. She is actively trying to persuade him to stay in Genoa City with his family, not because she wants distance, but because she recognizes the safety, stability, and emotional grounding that the Newman family represents. Unlike the chaotic, violent world she has been running from, Genoa City offers Noah protection, resources, and people who would notice immediately if something went wrong. Sienna's concern is amplified by her awareness of Adam Newman's presence in Noah's life, a figure whose complexity and intensity stand in stark contrast to the man Sienna once believed was her husband. This comparison underscores how drastically different Noah's environment is from the one she escaped. And it reinforces her fear that pulling him into her unresolved past could destroy the very future he hopes to build. That past is embodied most clearly in the figure of Matt Clark, who has been operating under the false identity of Mitch Bacall, a deception that allowed him to build a lucrative and deeply dangerous criminal enterprise centered on the trafficking of illegal substances. Matt's double life is not just a plot twist, it is the source of the terror that reshaped Sienna's entire existence. His operation generated massive profits, but it also relied on intimidation, coercion, and violence, and once Noah became entangled in that world, the threat escalated dramatically. Matt's attempt to force Noah to ingest those substances was not merely an act of cruelty, it was a calculated move that could have cost Noah his life, either through overdose or through the irreversible damage caused by drugs he had no understanding of. That moment alone marked a turning point, transforming Noah from an outsider into a direct target, and making it painfully clear that loving Sienna meant inheriting the dangers attached to her history. Even more chilling was Matt's plan to eliminate Sienna herself, driven by the cold logic that she had seen too much, knew too much, and could no longer be controlled. The idea that Sienna's life was expendable to him crystallizes the depth of his threat and explains why her instincts are now governed by caution rather than romantic idealism. The assault that followed, involving Matt and his associates, was not just an attack but an attempt to erase both Noah and Sienna as liabilities. That they survived at all speaks to their resilience, their ability to fight back together, and the intense bond forged through shared trauma. Surviving something that brutal does not weaken a relationship, it hardens it, reshaping love into something quieter but stronger, grounded in trust rather than fantasy. It is precisely because of this ordeal that Sienna ultimately reaches a pivotal conclusion. She does not want Noah to return to Los Angeles with her. This decision, which might initially appear contradictory to her earlier plans, actually represents growth and clarity. The woman portrayed by Braun steps into a new phase of self-awareness, recognizing that love sometimes means refusing sacrifice rather than demanding it. By telling Noah she no longer wants him to uproot his life for her, Sienna is acknowledging the cost he has already paid simply by standing beside her. In doing so, she reframes their relationship not as an escape, but as a choice that must be made with full awareness of risk and consequence. Noah's desire to leave remains powerful, but now it is met with a counterweight: Sienna's determination not to let love become another weapon used against him. The hope that Sienna Bacall will remain in Genoa City reflects more than audience affection, it reflects the character's narrative potential. Braun has proven to be a remarkable addition to the cast, initially introduced in a way that suggested she was little more than an acquaintance from Holden Novik's California past. That understated entrance cleverly lowered expectations, allowing Sienna to emerge organically as a character of depth, agency, and emotional gravity. She has moved far beyond the role of a supporting figure and now stands as someone capable of shaping long-term storylines, particularly those involving Noah's emotional future. Her intelligence, restraint, and moral clarity position her as a credible partner for Noah, not just in romance, but in maturity. The suggestion that she could become Noah's first wife no longer feels premature or exaggerated. It feels like a natural progression for a relationship that has already endured trials most couples never face. There is, however, an undercurrent of uncertainty that adds tension to this hope, the possibility that Braun may be on a short-term contract. This raises questions about whether Matt's legal troubles will be fully explored on screen, or whether his removal by Victor Newman will serve as a narrative endpoint rather than a beginning. If the show chooses to delve into the legal aftermath of Matt's crimes, it would naturally keep Sienna and Noah in proximity to him through court proceedings, investigations, and fallout, providing further opportunities to develop their bond under pressure. Such a direction would allow the story to explore accountability, justice, and healing, while giving Sienna agency as someone no longer running from her past, but confronting it with support rather than isolation. Noah's desire for Sienna to stay is not rooted in control or fear, but in the belief that they can build something safer together within the orbit of his family. That decision, whether she accepts or resists it, will be pivotal not only for their relationship but for Noah's evolution as a character. Leaving Genoa City would mark a dramatic step into adulthood defined by separation and risk, while staying would represent a different kind of courage. Choosing to face danger with a community rather than fleeing it alone. The weight of that decision is amplified by the knowledge that everyone has already voiced their opinions about Matt during the improvised trial Victor Newman staged at the cottage. A moment that symbolically closed one chapter while leaving its consequences unresolved. Victor's decision to remove Matt rather than execute him underscored the importance of restraint, but it also ensured that the shadow of Matt's actions would linger, influencing choices long after his physical presence disappeared. Ultimately, this storyline asks a question that sits at the heart of the young and the restless. When love is forged in crisis, does it pull people away from home, or does it redefine what home means? Noah's instinct is to follow his heart wherever it leads, while Sienna's instinct is to protect the person she loves by anchoring him somewhere safer. The tension between those instincts is what gives their story emotional credibility. As the decision looms, viewers are left watching not for a dramatic exit or a sudden wedding, but for a quieter, more consequential choice, one that will determine whether Noah's future is shaped by escape or by resilience, and whether Sienna's story continues as a fleeting chapter or becomes a foundational part of Genoa City's evolving landscape.